YouTube, what's up? Back again for another daily fishing video here on Andrew Upshaw Fishing. Made it back to Tulsa last night, and real quick, I'm just going to tell you, we drove through the worst conditions I've ever been on a road in my entire life. It wasn't the road's fault, it was the weather. When we were approaching up through McAllister, I looked up and I saw these storm clouds look different. And I was like, man, this doesn't look good. This looks bad, actually. Wasn't worried about tornadoes or anything, just wasn't the right kind of condition for tornadoes, but man, this looks like it could be kind of a nasty storm. We roll up there in it, and guys, I'm telling you right now, there's 40-mile-an-hour winds, and they just redone the middle of the road, so it was red, like that red clay, that red dirt, that Oklahoma red dirt, and that wind mixed with like insanely heavy rain had flooded the road solid red. You could not see the lines. We saw 2 accidents within. And this happened for like 5 or 6 miles straight. You could not see, and I was worried about pulling over and getting hit from behind, but I mean, just absolutely terrifying. So one trick for y'all, if you haven't realized it before, when you get in those crazy conditions like that, throw you on some sunglasses, some polarized sunglasses while you're driving, and it'll help you see a whole lot better. Something about cutting that glare from the rain and everything, you can just see everything way better. I think it makes a huge difference. But hey guys, real fast, today's video is talking about a technique that I just don't think people really fish anymore. They used to back in the day, but with the, mass-produced crankbaits and all these other ledge fishing baits, people don't give it the credit it deserves. So we're going to talk a little bit about that today, how to fish it and everything you need to do. But real fast, if you haven't subscribed to this channel yet, make sure you hit that sub button in the bottom right-hand corner. Comment below, what is the craziest conditions you've ever driven in? I mean, that one was pretty close to the top of my list for sure. Y'all comment below. I hope y'all enjoy this video and you'll learn a little bit about throwing a big bait out there for offshore fish. Alright guys, today's topic of discussion is offshore fishing with a bait that never really gets talked about anymore, especially in the summertime. You hear about it on a couple lakes, and that's spinnerbait, and namely a really heavy spinnerbait. This one right here is a 1 ounce. I'll throw it in quite a few different sizes, but you hear about it on like Lake Eufaula, fishing brush piles and keeping your spinnerbait above the brush pile and stuff like that. But I'll be honest with you guys, I've actually caught quite a few really big fish this time of year slow rolling a big bladed spinnerbait or just a heavy wire, heavy weight spinnerbait out there on ledges. So many times we see guys out there and they're throwing swim baits, they're throwing crankbaits, they're throwing all these different types of baits trying to catch bass. But one thing a lot of people forget is going to the old standby spinnerbait. This is the one I actually throw all the time. It's just Sexy Shad spinnerbait. I don't know if color really matters that much. I like to have a little yellow in it, and Sexy Shad is just such a good shad imitator. But I throw the bottom dweller. I throw it in a couple sizes. I either throw the 1 ounce or I think it's an 1 3/8 or 1 1/4 ounce. But basically, what you do is you find your school fish, and sometimes that's the hardest part, is actually finding where they live. But you find where those fish are and find where they're set up, and you actually can fire them up, throwing a crankbait, throwing your worm, whatever, catch you a couple in a row. And that's when I pull out the spinnerbait. One of the very best places I ever found on Toledo Bend, I found using the big spinnerbait. And the thing is when you get on a lake like Toledo Bend, Sam Rayburn, that have a lot of timber, a lot of brush piles, and that's what you're fishing a lot of times, timber and brush piles, you can actually take that spinnerbait and you're not going to get hung near as much. And you can put a little swim bait on the bait. You can do a lot of little tinkering things to it. But what you do is you take 20-pound test line. I'd throw 20-pound test fluorocarbon. I throw it on a fairly heavier action rod because the thing is there's so much weight built into that spinnerbait, and the force that you're having to jerk that rod to set the hook, you kind of need that little bit of extra backbone. But 20-pound line, I'll actually drop my gear ratio to a 6:8 to 1. I think that's a big deal when it comes to spinnerbait because it forces you to slow it down just a little bit, and you need to slow that thing down. But basically, the most important thing is to throw it out there and let it go to the bottom. Even if it takes 5, 10 seconds, whatever it may be. And like I said, you're throwing on 20-pound line, you're throwing on 6:8 to 1 gear ratio reel. So you have to make sure slow is in your mind. So what I do is I let it go to the bottom. You know it's on the bottom whenever your line is laying on the top of the water and not sinking anymore, not at least quickly. Because when you're throwing this big bait, you know it's hit the bottom at that point. So then I actually will keep my rod tip low and I'll start slowly reeling it. That's the first technique. Now, I know it sounds super simple, but what you do is after you've reeled it 6 or 8 times, real slow, I'll actually thumb it and let it drop back down. And it goes back down the bottom. And you realize, man, I was about a foot or 2 to 3 foot off the bottom. And then you start reeling it again. And it keeps it down there in that strike zone near the bottom. And I think that's probably one of the most important parts. Now, that's the first way that I have fished a spinnerbait. Now, with the, with live scope coming out, active target, and all these other forward-facing sonars that are going on right now, throwing a big spinnerbait is actually probably one of the best times to throw it is right now. So, like fishing brush piles, the way like Wheeler won at Eufaula, Dustin Connell won, Red Crest, and you've seen others do extremely well doing it, is you take that big spinnerbait out and you throw it and you can watch it actually fall. So you know exactly the depth that it's falling to, and then you reel it right over the top of that brush pile or right next to it. Now that's a big deal. Is knowing exactly where your bait is in relation to the brush pile. Sometimes you want it over the top, sometimes you want it along the sides. That way you kind of can see exactly where it's coming. Now the cool thing is when you get it on live scope or other forward-facing sonars, you can actually see the big blob swim out there to eat the bait. Most of the time you actually see the fish eat it, and which is just absolutely spectacular. So you can actually judge the brush pile based off of what you're seeing the activity of the fish. Or maybe if you're not throwing the right color or throwing the right type of bait, you know pretty quick because they're not going to come out there and eat it. They'll come out and look at it and they'll go back in. They'll come out and look at it and they'll go back in. And you actually see that. Now on the retrieve for that big 1-ounce spinnerbait in that situation, you just want a slow, steady retrieve. Maybe give it a little bounce every once in a while, but you want to keep it pretty slow and steady because that's the whole art behind this. It's almost kind of like throwing an umbrella rig because you have the blades and all that, but it really is effective. Now, probably my third and my favorite bite when it comes to a spinnerbait, I don't know the exact terminology. My dad and I learned it from Ben Matsubu 12 years ago, 13 years ago. We just always coined it Lindy hopping. And that is the idea of you throw it out there real far and you let it go to the bottom and you burn it like 2 or 3 times. And then you keep your rod at 10 o'clock. And what that bait does, it shoots up off the bottom and then it glides down. With that spinnerbait, you see guys nowadays throwing a hair jig doing it that way, which is so funny because I really wish I could have put 2 and 2 together because I've known about that technique for a really long time. But, we used to do it with a spinnerbait where, you'd let that spinnerbait glide down. And if you had really good swivels on your spinnerbait, the blade would still be turning as it's falling. So it would go, so it would just constantly do this across the bottom. Well, on most of your bites came either as soon as you engage your reel off the bottom. So as soon as it would dart up, they'd either come right then, or whenever you'd already stopped reeling and it was gliding down and those blades were barely just turning, that's when and I mean, when I say guys, it would knock slack in your line. They'd hit it so terribly hard. Probably one of the coolest bites ever. It will wear you out. It's kind of like, in my opinion, it's almost real similar to like throwing a 10XD as far as how much fatigue it gives you because you're having to reel so hard and so fast that it is a really rough on your body. But man, like, to me, if I could put it into perspective for you, I used to hate flipping. Hate it. I mean, like, when I say hate, like, I can't even put into words how much I hated flipping. But whenever I started really figuring flipping out and getting the bites, all that strain of flipping all day became absolutely worth it because, like, man, some of the bites, some of the catches you have flipping are amazing. Well, the spinnerbait, throwing that big 1-ounce spinnerbait offshore is another one of those, especially when you're speed burning it like that and making it go up and down. The bites that you get with that, it's just absolutely ridiculous. Now, the fourth place that I throw the big 1-ounce spinnerbait, and this is the last place, guys, is in a situation that you're dealing with at Sam Rayburn right now, fishing those deep flooded trees. Now, are they going to bite it every time? No. But in my opinion, and I could be wrong here, but I fished Rayburn when it's been extremely flooded a handful of times. And extremely flooded place, I've had guys from South Louisiana asking me how to catch them when it gets like that and all kinds of places. What I like to do is, even when I'm flipping, instead of flipping like a 3/8 ounce, like everybody in your mind, you're like, man, I need to flip this 3/8. That is not heavy enough for 8, 9, 10-foot bushes. It is not. You're not going to get to the bottom. You're not going to get down to the strike zone of which those fish are sitting at. And most of the time, that's near the bottom of the bush or the tree. Now, time and time, from time to time, they're going to be suspended up in the tree. And that's a lot of times when you're going to catch them on spinnerbait. But a lot of times, they are actually at the bottom of the base of the tree, what I would call the nuts of the tree, basically. But that's where they're going to be living. Well, when I'm flipping a heavy weight. Well, in the same sense, when I'm spinnerbaiting those trees, I'm going to at least a 3/4 or 1 ounce spinnerbait. Once again, cast it out, let it go to the bottom, and I'm going to slow roll it past the bases of these trees. Instead of fishing it high in the water column, trying to catch suspended fish that have seen 50 baits already in a day, I'm going to fish this thing really close to the bottom and try to get those fish that are actually staged up on the bottom side of those trees. It's a really big way to catch fish. You can go out there right now. I'm telling you guys, I promise you, if you are fishing ledges and you're catching bass offshore, and say, for instance, you're catching them deep cranking, you're catching them on a worm, and you got a spot that they're piled up in, take you this 1 ounce spinnerbait. Catch you a couple cranking, catch you a couple doing whatever. Cast that 1 ounce spinnerbait out there, and you're going to see exactly what I'm talking about. You're going to have fun. You're going to catch a couple big ones. You're going to be like, oh my gosh, why haven't I thrown a spinnerbait in the summertime? Guys don't do it very much anymore, guys. I'm telling you, it's not a secret. People just don't talk about it. I hope this spinnerbait tip helps you catch more fish. It definitely has helped me in the past, and I know it's going to help you in the future. I hope you enjoyed this video. If you have not yet, hit that sub button in the bottom right-hand corner. Share this video with a friend. If you've made it this far, share it with a friend. Text it to a buddy and tell them, hey, you need to go throw a spinnerbait this summer, and this is why. And this is how you need to throw it. I hope you enjoyed this video, guys, and I'll see you on the next one.